Dear friends, welcome to the fifth program of our season 2. Aligarh Society of History and Archaeology and Ganga Jamni welcomes you all. Today, as the country which Gandhiji liberated from the foreign yoke is busy belittling even our freedom movement, what to talk about Gandhiji? You remember just a few days back, a hate monger claimed that India gained real independence only in 2014. And what we got in 1947 was just bheek, arms. And in the background, when she was making such comments, we heard the audience laughing and clapping. And the anchor tried to pass off the comment as a joke. This ignorant hate monger is not an isolated nut. In fact, since 2014, the relevance of the Mahatma is being attempted to be officially reduced to that of a sanitary inspector. His anniversaries are being reduced to spectacles with netas wielding brooms. We are actually killing Gandhiji every single day. Gandhiji gave a message which was heeded throughout the world, from South Africa to the US to the Middle East, and truly the relevance of India is through his name. Even those who belittle him, they are forced to bow before his image to make themselves acceptable when outside the country. We need the toothless, naked fakirs more than ever before. But then the question is, when we as a nation are negating what he stood for, what he fought for, then do we really deserve Gandhiji? Actually, do we? To discuss this issue, we have with us today the grandson of Manilal, the second son of our father of nation, Mahatma Gandhiji. Tushar Gandhi likes to introduce himself as a writer, influencer, social commentator, Gandhi storyteller, peace and rights activists, among other things. He is the author of a book with a very provocative title, Let's Kill Gandhi, which was published way back in 2007. And expectedly, it was an instant bestseller. Way back in 1998, Tusharji had established the Mahatma Gandhi Foundation at Vadodara. Since 1996, he has served as the president of the Lok Seva Trust, an NGO which a nephew of Mahatma Gandhiji had established in central Mumbai in the mid 1950s for the welfare of textile mill laborers. In March 2005, he led the 75th anniversary reenactment of Dandi March of Gandhiji. From 2007 to 2012, he was made the Goodwill Ambassador of Intergovernmental Institution for the use of microalgae spirulina against malnutrition. In 2018, he played a significant role in petitioning successfully the Supreme Court of India to direct the states of the Union territories to comply with its orders to curb cow vigilant lynch mobs. In 2019, he became a director of the Gandhi Research Foundation in Jalgaon in Maharashtra. Way back in 2001, he also had his share of controversy when he negotiated with American marketing firm CMG Worldwide for the use of Mahatma's image in an advertisement, which was aimed towards university students for a credit card company. This perceived betrayal of Gandhian ideals was followed by a public outcry, causing him to cancel the deal. He, however, had his reasons for doing so. Let us hear what Tusharji has to say as an answer to the dilemma which we face today. Although we do need Gandhiji, but do we actually deserve Gandhiji? Over to you, Tusharji.
Thank you very much, Professor Rizavi, and thank you very much, the Aligarh University and Ganga Jamni, for this invitation to be with you today and share my thoughts with you. Do we deserve Gandhi? We've reached that stage where we must honestly ask ourselves whether, as a people or as a nation, we deserve Gandhi. We even deserve to acknowledge him anymore. And there are very valid reasons. I'm not bothered about what a starlet says to garner cheap publicity or what a television network uh, broadcasts and popularizes for cheap TRPs and revenues. Those are insignificant things, although they gain significance because the clamor of those voices is alarmingly increasing in our country. And so, we used to be, my generation used to, when we started hearing these voices of fanatics, we used to convince ourselves that it's just a lunatic fringe and it will go away. Unfortunately, it never went away. It kept increasing till we became the fringe, and our voices became uh, faint and almost went away unheard. And that is where we must not ignore any of these kind of provocations and attempts, because it is not just one attempt that makes a difference, but the cumulative effect of that which makes a difference. Just before joining you, saw a very nice post on social media. Sometimes social media has some good things also, and so I saw a very good post. One of the Holocaust survivors said a very grand thing. She said, "Not all people are not all evil ever. Amongst people, there are 10% people who are evil, and there are 10% people who are good. But there are 80% people who can be swayed to do evil things or good things. And when evil deeds occur, it is the it is where these 80% go that makes it a Holocaust or uh, saves people from that Holocaust. This is what is happening to our nation, and that is why it is very essential that we ask ourselves this question: do we deserve Gandhi? Now, what did Gandhi stand for? What did Gandhi preach? What did Gandhi practice all his life? There were fundamental aspects of Gandhi which were not his inventions. He borrowed them from civilization itself, from time itself, from society itself. And those were truth, love, unity, non-violence, peace, inclusiveness, and frugality. These were the basic cornerstones of what today we like to call Gandhian Gandhiism. I don't believe in any isms, but there is a school that believes that there is Gandhiism and there are followers who are Gandhians. I have a big question about them also. But these were the principles on which Bapu picked up and lived his life and expected people to live their lives. And he admitted that these were the cornerstones of civilization itself. When humans began to understand the importance of these values and their importance in the practice, that is where family units, then communities, then societies, and then civilizations emerged and thrived. And when these values became discounted or started being corroded or eroded, civilization started crumbling. So many a times I am, when I'm invited to talk to people, I'm invited to answer the question, is Gandhi relevant today? And I am expected to defend that question, that is Gandhi relevant today? But at least for our nation and our people today, the bigger question is, do we deserve Gandhi? Gandhi had to do what he did in his lifetime. What he had to achieve, he achieved in his lifetime. He wouldn't have been ashamed to be called a beggar. Even in his lifetime, his greatest opponent called him a half naked fakir, and he took it as a compliment. He wasn't bothered about it. He would have taken being called a beggar as a compliment also and said, yes, for the needy, for those who have nothing, I don't mind bending my knees and bowing my head and beg for them. I will gladly become a beggar. So he wouldn't have minded at all being called a beggar because he had reduced himself to that level and below. That was the standard level of Indians of his time. You must remember how he started. When Gopal Krishna Gokhale asked him to travel and discover India before he started taking any stands on any issue. On returning from South Africa, he spent more than 1.5 years traveling the length and breadth of the country and discovering the soul of India. And he realized that the soul of India lived in its hamlets and villages and survived along with poverty, inequality, prejudices, and discrimination. And he realized that if I have to lead these people, if I have to serve these people, then I have to become like them. And he used symbolizations to the utmost. When he realized the people he would be leading and serving, he started becoming like them. From a aristocratic, well-to-do, successful barrister who was very anglicized, even in his appearance, he started simplifying it, gradually going from the English etiquette, well-dressed gentleman. He realized that I am fighting the British, and I cannot be an image of those British. And so he went into the Indian dress. When he came back from South Africa, the last 1 month in South Africa, he was wearing the lungi and the Just give me a second. Just give me a second. I have some technical hitch. I'll just get uh, done with it. Sorry, I'd forgotten to plug the electric source and my battery was dying off. So, very sorry about it. So, right from that time, he started with wearing a simple lungi and kurta like the Tamils whom he was leading in South Africa, the Tamil natives, the Bihari natives, the dress that they would be wearing, like a girmitia as they were called. Today we see prime ministers, dressing up in fancy attire. If they're going to see a military outpost, they'll be wearing a uniform that they do not deserve. They do not have a right to wear. But it is good photo ops. And some of them even go to a pilgrimage place dressed in a dandy suit and fancy dark glasses and things. Because they want to show the people that they lead that class of Indians. They're not bothered about the majority of Indians. That sets Gandhi apart from the so-called leaders. And so the question also arises, do we deserve Gandhi? A man who identified himself and made efforts to identify himself with the poorest of the poor and the weakest of the weak and was not ashamed of it. When he went to Buckingham Palace to meet the king, emperor, he was asked, will you be dressed according to the occasion or will you be dressed as you are today? And he said, if I was to change my attire, it would be an insult to the monarch because it would be false. I must go to him the way I am, naturally. And he went to the Buckingham Palace also dressed in his loincloth with a shawl to cover his upper body. He did not bother to get a suit for himself because he was not ashamed of that simplicity, that frugality, because he realized that this is the fate of my people, the people I am leading. And so, us who like to dress according to the occasion to impress people have to ask ourselves once again, do we deserve it? These are the more simple factors on which questions need to be asked of ourselves. There are much more serious aspects on which we really need to find the answer, do we deserve it? India was always divided, and her downfall has always been because of her divisions. From ancient times, since the caste system became the governing ideal of Indian society, we were divided. There was always us and them. The caste system itself was a very efficient and successful method of dividing a people and institutionalizing it. And so it was very easy for aggressors, for conquerors to enslave us because they just needed to exploit those divisions amongst us. Bapu realized this and he strove, and even before Bapu, many other political leaders realized that if we have to build a strength to fight the British, we need a unity, either a permanent unification or an occasional unity to fight the battles against British. Lokmanya Tilak, who was the hawk in Congress, realized that Hindu-Muslim unity was essential to fight the British because after 1857, the British had very successfully divided Hindus and Muslims and kept them divided and continued their rule over India because they had realized that if, like 1857, these two came together, it would be very easy for them to throw us off. And so Lokmanya Tilak himself went out of his way to bring the Muslim community into the fold and made the Lucknow Qarar with them. The Lucknow Agreement Pact was signed with the Muslims, giving them disproportionate representation and ensuring that they would come into the mainstream fold and join the protest. Bapu took that further and he said it's not only for the freedom movement that we need Hindus and Muslims to unite, but if this nation is to be formed and is to be successful, it needs a permanent bond of unity between Hindus and Muslims. And he strove for that. All his life, he strove for that. Apparently, he was even murdered because the fanatic Hindus could not accept this unity between Muslims and Hindus. I say apparently because there was a more sinister reason, and that is also based on the factor of unity. It was unity that threatened even the fanatics. And even today, it is a united India that poses a threat to the fanatics on all sides. Fanaticism is not exclusive to any religion. Fanaticism is a religion it's in its own, and it transcends all religions, all societies, all races. And to that, unity and love are the greatest challenges and greatest, they consider to be the greatest enemies. And the first effort of unity was within Hinduism that Bapu tried. And attempts on his life began from the time when he started working for the emancipation of the Harijans, whom we today call the Dalits. Although they prefer the term Dalit. But the change of names from Harijans, from Bhangi to Harijan to Dalit, has not made a difference to the prejudices against them, not made any difference to the atrocities committed against them, the oppression that they face, the injustices that they face. What was happening to their Bhangi ancestors continued to happen to their Harijan ancestors and continues to happen to the Dalit descendants even today. There has been no difference in their attitude towards them and the treatment of them. Yes, now it is a criminal offense, but how many of these atrocities go punished? How many of these perpetrators who dehumanize Dalits are ever prosecuted and punished? Some are accepted as tradition, some are accepted as rituals, and some are ignored. And Bapu, when in 1934 he started his campaign for liberating temples to the Harijans and allowing them access to the common wells in the villages, the water sources of the villages. The first attempt on his life started, the first recorded and known attempt on his life started in 1934, when the Hindu Muslim question was nowhere in the public eye, when Pakistan was not even dreamt of. The only person who had talked about the two nation theory was Savarkar. And yet in 1934 in Pune, a hand grenade was thrown on a car carrying Bapu. Fortunately, the hand grenade rolled off the car, bounced off the car, and exploded in the middle of the street. And thus Bapu and Ba both were saved from that attack. So we must remember that yes, it was hate that was trying to kill Gandhi. But they were trying to kill him because they did not want his plans for unity to succeed. And this was the greatest of his virtues, uniting people, making them understand the oneness of human beings. And he always said that the paths of worship may be different, the ideologies may be different, the practices may be different, but God is one, and we all strive to reach that God, finding our own path. So why can't we walk hand in hand? You practice what you believe in, I will practice what I believe in. But why can't we respect and accept each other's practices and give each other the space to practice that? This was his belief. And look what is happening today. To give you an example of just 2 days back, for the past month and a half, there's been a campaign going on in Gurgaon where a public space which was generally given to Muslim community to perform their namaz, Friday namaz, is being denied to them. And all sorts of methods are being tried to stop that. They've held pujas which were non-existent before over there. They've used threats, they've done morchas. Day before, the most heinous attempt was made where cow dung was thrown on the ground, all over the ground, so Muslims could not perform the mass. Now, how can we become such a fragile society where even the ritual of ibadat becomes a threat to us? Is there a difference between the ring of a Christian bell in a church and a Hindu bell of the temple? Does the sound of the bell in the temple only appeal to Hindus? Does the sound of the bell in the church only appeal to Christians? So why have we now become so hateful, where even the practice of ritual worship feels like a threat to us? This is an example of majoritarianism, which is not democracy. Democracy may uphold the principle of majority opinion, but a majority does not mean that it turns into majoritarianism, where a brute majority subjugates the minority and oppresses them with their own system and ideals and way of life. That is where the seeds of destruction are sown. And that is where, on the question of love, unity, and hate, when we have a society which is becoming habituated to this kind of hate, we have to ask ourselves, do we deserve Gandhi? This was one thing about hate or unity. Because hate and unity cannot be talked of in two different manners. They're both very closely associated with each other. Hate can only be countered by unity and love. I used to react very angrily before to hate and prejudices and things, till I discovered the fact that my own anger was adding to the hate rather than reducing it. And there was a very big question in front of me: what do we do to counter this hate? And I realized that we have to understand where that hate originates from. And we have to address that. And the best way to address hate is with kindness. Many a times Bapu was criticized because he wrote a letter to Hitler where he addressed him as my dear friend Hitler. And seeing what Hitler did, it sounds very, very bad that somebody would address him as my dear friend Hitler and would lead people to believe that is this a statement of admiration for Hitler. But we must understand that that was an appeal to whatever little good there might have been in the soul of Adolf Hitler. And Bapu believed that nobody was 100% evil or nobody was 100% good either. And what they became was what was dominant in their psyche, in their character at that point of time. And so it was our duty to appeal and encourage the better part of that person to become dominant and transform that person. And that is what he was attempting. Today, when we see an opponent, the first thing that comes to our mind is how can we destroy? And instead of destroying that ideology, that thought, that attitude, we focus on destroying the person. We do not realize that in doing that, we are destroying ourselves. And that is why we must ask ourselves the question, do we deserve Gandhi anymore? Because we have, we even those who claim to be Gandhians, another thing that needs to be questioned. Even we Gandhians have failed to understand the importance of transformation to punishment and revenge. We want to avenge things, we want to punish, we don't want to transform. A murderer must be hanged, a terrorist must be executed. Because transforming people takes a lot of effort. Executing people just takes one action to do. And I don't have to do it. I can always console myself that no, I didn't kill him. I just wanted him killed or her killed. There was somebody else to do my dirty work for. And as long as that is done, I will do it. I guarantee you this that when there is a mob shouting, kill the rapist, kill the murderer, kill the terrorist, execute him. Go and give them a noose in their hands and say, go, okay, you want to kill them? Go hang that person yourself. Go shoot that person yourself. You will then see how many of them have the courage to take the action. I'm not talking about a mob. I'm talking about an individual. A mob in its creation itself is a beast. When human beings turn into a mob, the entity that they create is a beast, is evil. That is what a mob is. There's no good mob at all, ever. A mob is a beast and it is evil, and that is how it forms. And when a mob is formed, then it's a collective action, and that is what, unfortunately, our judicial system has also not found a way of punishing or acting upon. How can you prosecute a mob? You need an individual because your prosecution is also based on revenge. Finally, once you convict that person, then you are going to punish that person and execute that person. How can you execute 100 strong mob, which 99 of them would not have acted the way they did if they had not formed a mob? But in the statute, there is no provision for prosecuting the entire mob. it has to come down to the individuals. We must have a neck to stretch for every news that we create. In that also we have negated Gandhi, where he talked about a justice system which would transform, which would correct behaviors, which would transform people. We abandoned it, and we created a justice system that only punishes. We talk in India, we like to talk that we don't have the brutal Sharia system. But what do? We have penalties for every crime. We don't chop off the head, but we make it worthless by locking that productive hand into a prison and brutalizing that person in a prison. Even if an innocent is put into prison, they are so brutalized by their stay in the prison that when they come out, they are a criminal. Prisons were supposed to be transformatories. But today, the only transformation they do is the brutalization of the people. So even there, we have abandoned Gandhi. And we all endorse the justice system. Criminals must be dealt with that way, without realizing that those criminals come from within society, within ourselves. What made them into those criminals? Do we bother to find out? Are all of them sociopaths, psychopaths? Do all of them have mental disorders? What causes that mental disorder? And if there is a mental disorder, is punishment the right thing to do, or should therapy be our practice? And then we talk about Gandhi. These are the things, these are the questions we need to ask ourselves today. 75 years after the Azadi that we got, which is now being called Bhik Mein Mili Azadi. I'm very proud of the fact that I descend from a person who became a beggar to liberate his motherland. That is the greatest humility of that man. And I'm proud of that fact. I don't take it as an insult. But those who became martyrs, all the millions of satyagrahis who gave up the prime of their lives, who may not have died in the struggle, but gave up their entire productive years to fight for what they believe in, they have been insulted. And as a nation, how have we taken this? Do we see, the majority who feels hurt by insignificant things, by depictions in movies, by a dialogue in a movie, by a character in a movie, by a TV serial, anything you name it. And I feel offended and I rush to seek redress. Where is that anguish for those who have been truly insulted? Where is our patriotism? We applaud Pakistani batsmen for hitting a century against India. It is sedition. But you insult the freedom fighters and you get a Padma Shri. So where is Gandhi in all this? Look at the hate that we have today. A Hindu superstar is caught with drugs. He's a victim. A Muslim superstar's son is caught going to a rave party where his friend has drugs. He's a bigda hua bacha and must be punished Because at 22, there are Jawans standing at our borders. Yes, we don't belittle the Jawans who protect us always. We honor them, we respect them. But why demonize a 22-year-old child, young man, just because the religion of his superstar father offends you? So, where is Gandhi? In present day India, you have a Ray-Ban wearing claimant to the Gandhi legacy. Where is Gandhi? And do we deserve him at all? Do we even deserve to remember him anymore? Because on social media, every day I have started dreading 2nd October and 30th January. Because I know that on those dates, social media will trend with the hashtag eulogizing his murder. And Gandhians from all over the world will inundate my timeline saying, look what they are doing, look what they are doing, look what they are doing. As if being the biological descendant, I am responsible to safeguard that. But when I go and supposedly sell his image to an advertising for an advertising campaign, then how dare I do that? Because he's the father of the nation. How dare I claim himself for myself? How dare I get a luxury pen made in his memory commemorating him? Who am I to do that? He's the father of the nation. Where does that father of the nation go when people insult him and nobody utters a word? Do we deserve it? These are the questions we must ask ourselves, and we must ask ourselves honestly whether we today at all deserve Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. I don't call him the Mahatma. The Mahatma is also an excuse to convince ourselves that he was great, he was a Mahatma, he was a noble soul, he was almost divine, and that is why he could do whatever he did. And we are mere mortals, insignificant, and so we cannot even think of walking on the path that he trod. It's an excuse that we have created for ourselves to not follow him. And that is why all my life I have tried to introduce Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi to people. Because the fascinating aspect is the transformation of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi into what he became towards the end of his life. That is what needs to be emulated. That is what needs to inspire us. We must find the Gandhi within ourselves. Even today, when his voice becomes fainter and fainter and seems like fading away, he still is within us. We must not forget that. And that is the voice that we need to bring out. That is the voice we need to start hearing, listening to, the still, faint, small voice that Bapu always turned to when faced with a dilemma. It is, I ask the question, do we deserve Gandhi? We will always deserve Gandhi. There's no question about it. Because it is not the individual that matters. It is the ideals, it is the practice, it is the belief that matters. And this battle is to preserve the ideals, the practices, and the beliefs of that human. The thought of that person is much more important to us than the individual himself could ever be. History is not about individuals, history is about their deeds. And that is what we must learn. Unfortunately, we have turned history into individuals also. And that is where we want revenge for history. We want to correct history. We want to change history. We want to create our own history. Remember one thing, it is only people who don't have the capabilities of making history who want to write versions of that history. So become makers of history, not writers of history or changers of history or adapters of history, as it is being done today. And that is where let us focus on the legacy and not the individual. So I once again thank you very much, Professor Rizaviji. I believe that we will have a dialogue session. So let's have more time for people. If they have questions, I'm willing to take those questions. And thank you very much to the Aligarh University and to Ganga Jamni for this opportunity to me. But let us dedicate ourselves to the ideals of Gandhi. And maybe if we do that, then we will be able to answer the question that I have raised, do we deserve Gandhi? And say, yes, we do. Let's come to that time. Thank you very much.
Uh, Thank you, Tusharji. Actually, it was a real experience to hear you speak on this topic. As you rightly pointed out, that history is not about individuals. It is about the ideas. It is about the legacies of those who had been the actors of history. You rightly pointed out that today, instead of actually understanding what history is all about, we have started, stressing about individuals. In fact, even in our democracy, whatever is left of the democracy, even here, the individual we find is being given more importance than the nation itself. I also totally agree with you that fanaticism is something which transcends communities. It is not Hindu communalism or Muslim communalism or Christian communalism. Fanatics are to be found in all societies, and we have to understand. Mahatma Gandhi too faced a large number of fanatics during his own lifetime, whether it was at Noakhali, whether it was elsewhere. The fact that Gandhi stood against both the type of fanatics is one of the lessons which today we have totally forgotten. Do we deserve Gandhi? As I started in the beginning, sir, we need Gandhi. There is no doubt about it. But the question is, as you rightly pointed out during the process of your talk, that as far as deserving Gandhi is concerned, there lies the problem. Having forgotten his ideals and doing exactly the opposite for which he stood for, this question, in fact, is a burning question for us. Before I start taking up uh, a number of questions which have been asked by the audience, I would just remind that what Gandhi did during his lifetime was not something which was new for the country. Even hundreds of years before Gandhiji, during the 16th, 17th centuries, there was a man who, like Gandhi, preferred to wear dhoti even in public. Once an ambassador from Iran came to the capital Darus Sultanate, Agra, and was inquiring the people, where can I meet the emperor? The people said, he's before you. And he wrote in his account that he found a man wearing ordinary clothes, just like the clothes of the other people who surrounded him, with his hand resting on the shoulder of a peasant and talking to them. And he was told that this is Akbar. You know, Gandhi, as I have tried to understand him, drew his ideas, his ideals from a large number of sources. And one of the sources which I think, just like Gandhi is being neglected today, was the policy of Sulhekul, which had been propounded by the third Mughal emperor, who incidentally, just like Gandhi, is being trashed by the present dispensation. Gandhiji, one of the greatest, contributions, which I believe, Tusharji, uh, mm, uh, I don't have much understanding of the modern period of history because I basically belong to the medieval part of it. But my belief about the whole entire freedom struggle of India, which now is being trashed, is that it would never ever would have succeeded but for Gandhiji converting a middle class movement into a mass movement. It was only after Gandhi's intervention that the Indian National Congress, or the movement which it was leading, which was confined to certain sections of the society, now became a popular movement with all type of people, kisans and students and workers and factory workers, all type of people joining in. I must thank you today that through your lecture you did try to point out that there is a difference between a mass movement and the mob. Today what we see, just a negation of what Gandhiji stood up for, is that we have converted our, the whole movement into a mobocracy. And thus, In this situation, we again have to ask the question which, as you rightly pointed out, that is constantly asked from you, whether we do deserve this great personality uh, today or not. In one of the earlier weeks, we had a lecture by Purushottam Agarwalji. He also, like you, tried to argue that there was a larger conspiracy behind why the murder of Gandhiji took place. He also tried to argue that Gandhi's murder was not the murder of an individual, it was an attempt to silence an idea by which the communal forces were being threatened. Thank you for reminding us of that once again. With these brief, comments, I would try to take up a few questions which have been put up by the audience. Ashok Mathur, as you can see on your screen, asked what would be a formula Bapu would have adopted to counter majoritarianism which we find today.
A simple answer to that is what Bapu did in his own lifetime: the responsibility of the individual. A mob is successful because a right thinking individual does not act to prevent the designs of the mob. There have been examples throughout India in communal strife, in crisis situation, where a brave individual has stood up to a mob and forced it to backtrack. It has happened always. In this case, also, we need to understand. We love to talk about the power of zero and how ancient India discovered the power of zero and the power of one and all that. But when it comes to responsibility, we forget that we are that one. We are that indomitable one. And in situations where there is a mob that is going down the wrong path, it becomes our responsibility to stand up and tell them this is wrong, it is not acceptable, because our silence emboldens them. And so, if you want to ask what Bapu would have done to prevent this mobocracy, would be to remind them that democracy was not the rule of the mob, but the rule of the individual. The ideal of democracy is empowerment of the individual, not of the majoritarian idea. It empowers, and that is where there is no collective vote. There is an individual franchise, because it acknowledges the fact that every individual vote matters, and what an individual vote is an individual opinion. But we have now sort of convinced ourselves that democracy is just about voting, and then it's fine. Democracy, once they get a majority, then they are free to do what they like. No. In an ideal majority, in an ideal democracy, they are never free to do what they like. Even if they have an absolute majority, they cannot act in an absolute manner. They have to listen to opinion, they have to listen, and that is where in a democracy opposition is more important than the ruling combined. A democracy suffers when we have a weak opposition, even if it is an opposition of two MPs. If they are conscientious enough, they will be enough to restrain a rampant government. We've had examples of that also in our democracy. We've overthrown a leader going towards authoritarianism and stopped her in her tracks through democratic methods. That is the Gandhian way of countering majoritarianism. It is only when we abdicate our responsibilities as individuals that the majority thrives and becomes rampant and uncontrolled.
Uh, Very correct. Ashok Mathurji, I would just add one more thing to what Tushar Gandhiji pointed out. I would remind you of February 1922, the Chora Chori incident. It reflects something what is happening today.
Yes.
Mobs, uh, you know, started ransacking a police station. A large number of people, policemen and others were killed. There were certain, Indian National Congress leaders who criticized Gandhiji. Why is he taking back his movement? They took it as a success. But Gandhiji was adamant. This rampaging mobs is not the success of the freedom movement at all. Gandhiji, in fact, took two steps backward. And that shows that had Gandhiji been relevant today or been present today, what he would have done in the present context when we see so many mobs rampaging throughout our country. Vikhar Ali Saab asked why Savarkar hated Gandhiji when Jinnah was villain of partition.
Uh, Vikaraliji, I differ with you on the second part of your question. Why Jinnah, why Savarkar hated Gandhi was only because of Gandhi that the imagined national leadership of Savarkar was curbed. The ideology of hate that Savarkar subscribed to and wanted to impose on India, the ideology of exclusivity that Savarkar subscribed to, failed due to the force of Gandhi, and that was very natural for Savarkar to hate Gandhi because you know hadn't he suffered Kalapani, hadn't he gone and spent so much time in the cellular jail in the Kalapani, hadn't he made such sacrifices for India, and then to be sidelined completely, not be there anywhere in the freedom that we got, would give him a lot of reasons to hate Gandhi. The man who even went and made pacts with the British to become a faithful subject of the empire. He sacrificed so much, he sacrificed his own ideology because at one point of time he was a revolutionary and he espoused, even if his actions do not show that. His ideals, his ideology showed the revolutionary zeal that he had. And just imagine, for self benefit, the man compromised that ideology also. He went and begged for forgiveness, mercy for himself, not for his nation, for himself, and got the freedom. And having paid such a great price to be marginalized completely by a rampant Gandhi, what must have hurt him so much. So he had a justification to hate Gandhi. Let us understand that. Let us understand the character of that person who did not mind compromising his very basic ideals for self preservation, as compared to a man who did not consider self preservation to be at all essential. who was willing to give up everything for his ideology. Look at the contrast between the two characters. And it is very, very natural for the one who felt defeated to hate the one whom he considered was the reason for that defeat. I don't consider Jinnah to be the villain of partition at all. I believe that the circumstances that were there. Yes, Jinnah was an ambitious person and he realized that his ambition could only be successful if he carved out a domain for himself. And he did that. It was the necessity that the British pandered to because they wanted to hand over India a Pyrrhic victory which they would regret for the rest of their lives. And so they partitioned India. If the British had been honest, there were many compromise formulas to which they could have brought Jinnah, or they could have even isolated Jinnah in the very Muslim League itself, because there were dissenting voices within the Muslim League also, which did not want a separate nation. All they wanted was their own domain, their political preservation. If that was assured in independent India, Pakistan wouldn't have been a reality. So I don't consider Jinnah to be the villain of partition at all.
Uh, uh, quite right. I mean, I would say that uh, Jinnah was not the only person who was a villain for partition. Uh, there were many common factors between Savarkar and Jinnah. Uh, both uh, hated Gandhi to the same extent, and both represented a certain section of the society, whereas Gandhi represented an idea of India. And both these individuals, whether it was Savarkar or Jinnah, found that idea to be very repugnant. So if Savarkar was hating Gandhiji, Jinnah was also hating Gandhiji, and both of them were hating it for similar reasons. There, I mean, there are. I mean, Purushottam Agarwal, he did speak 2 weeks back, and we did hear him. And I'm not going to repeat what he told us, but the thing is that as Tusharji pointed out, that Gandhi, we should not take him only as an individual. He represents an idea, and it was that idea which was being, opposed by such people. They may be Hindu, they may be Muslim, but those elements could never, tolerate an idea which was being put forward by Mahatma Gandhi.
Sure.
Mr. Hussain Saab, sir, according to archival records, death of Mahatma Gandhi was mourned on governmental level in Pakistan, and death of Jinnah was mourned on governmental level in India, and flags were half-mast on government buildings. If Pakistan-India relations will get better, do you think this thing can be revived again to remember his death anniversary?
I believe that these are mere token gestures. I applaud the fact that we had the nobility and maturity, both the nations, after such a bitter separation. We still had the nobility of honoring each other in this manner. But in today's time, I believe that the relationship, the poison of hate that has been mixed into our relationship needs to be countered. Rituals will happen spontaneously and they should happen spontaneously. I'm not one who follows or practices rituals. I believe that they have to become a way of life. Our lives have to reflect. You see, the irony of India today I'll keep saying this again and again. We need to be reminded of this. The irony of India and of the subcontinent is that in India, if you applaud Pakistan's victory in a cricket match, it attracts the charge of sedition. But if you demean the entire freedom movement and the sacrifices of the freedom fighters, it is patriotic. That is what we need to be bothered about, worried about. Whether we do a ritual on 30th January or on the death anniversary of Muhammad Ali Jinnah is merely a tokenism in their remembrance. Even after partition, Muhammad Ali Jinnah talked about a secular republic of equality of all religions and treatment to all religions. It's a different matter that that is not in practice, and his country is now an Islamic nation. We should cherish that ideal because finally, even today, whether it is an Islamic nation, it still claims Muhammad Ali Jinnah to be its founder. And if that is true, then somewhere in its being there should be the ingredient of the ideology of Muhammad Ali Jinnah also. Today, both the nations have a lack of that credibility. In India, we celebrate Gandhi's death anniversary, Gandhi's birthday, but where are the qualities that Gandhi enshrined? Where are the ideals in our way of life? Those are more important than these rituals.
Zainab Naqvi asks a question, makes a comment and then a question. We live at a time when a political leader at the launch of the book on Savarkar says Marxist historians malign Savarkar as a fascist and name Gandhiji in connection of his mercy pleas to the British and conveniently gets away with it. Isn't factual history left to the historians and the masses are consuming lies and distortions? Isn't it high time to look for ways how we can reach the legacy to larger audience and not just confine it to history experts? Is there a way?
There is a way. We need to make history relevant. For too long, history has become academized a lot and it is confined to the circles of academia. If I'm not interested in doing graduation or post graduation or doctoral studies in history, I'm not bothered about it because history has not become a component of my life. And so the values of an authentic historian are also lost with that. And so it is very easy for purveyors of lies to sort of, condemn historians as Marxist historians and liberal historians or left liberal historians and sort of create a doubt on their authenticity. And that is where history should be made a part of life. Its importance needs to be made aware of in the very beginning, even in schools. Parents say हिस्ट्री में मग्गा मार के पास हो जाओ, बस इतना ही करना है, उससे कोई रोजी रोटी नहीं मिलनी है, अपने को टीचर थोड़ी बनना है, अपने को प्रोफेसर थोड़ी बनना है, अपने को तो इंजीनियर बनना है, डॉक्टर बनना है. That is what is the fate of history today because schools teach history in such a boring manner from textbook lessons only that the vibrancy of history is lost. And with that vibrancy, the relevance of history in today's life is also lost. And so I'm not bothered about history. Why should I care? I'm sorry. If I subscribe to the ideology of Rajnath Singh, then I'll believe the version of history he teaches me. If I believe in the ideology of a Marxist communist, I will believe the ideology or the history that he preaches or she preaches. I will not bother about the fundamental history, which has no versions, which is dispassionate, which is a statement of account of events. And so history needs to be made into a live, living organism, interesting organism. The practice of telling it as stories has to be revived instead of making it into a very drab dates, events, persons thing. Yes, that is required as a record. But as a subject of study, it needs to get a soul. It needs to get a life of its own. And once we do that, then society will understand the importance of that history.
Well, Ali Haider Saab, has a very interesting comment to make and a question. Sir, don't you think that influence of very pro-Islamic Pranami sect of Hinduism that was introduced by Ramnathji during Mughal era and to which Mahatma Gandhi's mother Putlibai belonged to could have influenced Mahatma Gandhi's ideas of Hindu-Muslim unity and veneration of Islam? It's really sad that this sect is not that much talked about as a bridge between Islam and Hinduism, just like Sikhism is talked about. Your comments?
Yeah, I agree with you. The Pranami sect was the bridge that respected both the religions, practiced uh, truly Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, just like Sufi Islam of that time. And we have lost both of those. We have lost the Pranami practices, the traditions of the Pranami sect, the importance of the Pranami sect. And we are losing the importance of the Sufi Islamic school also. We see more and more of the fanatic, rabid Islamic, rigid Islamic practices being imposed on society and becoming very popular amongst Muslims. So, on both sides, that is what I'm saying. Fanaticism is not restricted to an individual or a religion. It is a human trait, and it it is, when it is dominant, we all become fanatics. Liberalism has always been because it respects and honors divergent views, is always seen as the weak and the meek idea. We do not understand its strength and its durability and its long lasting life. That is what we must understand. And yes, in that, I believe Pranami sect and the Sufi practice of Islam and the ideals of the Sikh religion, that was a mixture of both these ideologies, are the bridges that we must revive if we want to really live as a nation.
Well, let's have another question. Pawan Patrick, do you see any possibility that we would revive back the Gandhian values?
Well, Pavanji, if we have to survive, if we have to last, if we have to exist, we will have to revert to those values because as I said in the beginning, there are no Gandhian inventions of values. His values were derived from the values on which the foundation of society and civilization itself was laid. And if we have to survive as a society or a civilization, then those values can never be, uh, of no concern, of no importance. So yes, they are there. They are there. It's only that in phases we feel that they are being completely subjugated by the forces of hatred. but it's very difficult to sustain hate. But also, we must understand that we cannot be complacent and say, नहीं नहीं ये temporary phase है ये चला जाएगा, because the damage that hate does in even the limited period of its dominance lasts for a long, long time. And what we must do is try to reduce that damage, the capability of theirs to inflict that damage on us, if we are to survive in a healthy future and not carry baggage with us. Look at the baggage that we've been carrying from partition for 70 years and more. And look at how that has spawned hate again and again and again. And you will understand that the evil of partition was confined to a couple of years, but its legacy has gone on for 7 decades and more. And so the evil of this current phase will also be defeated at one point of time. But for how many centuries will we carry the baggage of this evil, which will determine the health of our future? That is what we should be concerned about.
Uh, Let me take one more question. Uh, uh, Sir Bapu never preferred political positions. His ideology was backed by political parties and individual politicians. Is there any such individual today in whom you have faith who can take up Gandhian ideology to be practiced by political parties and individuals?
The common Indian, for me, he or she is the only hope that we have for India. Because the idea of India enshrines the common person, the last person of society, the least person of society. And I believe that the solution will also emerge from that. I don't believe in individual solutions anymore. I'm disillusioned to that belief. I believe that the good will happen only collectively if a collective of people come together and persevere for good to happen, no matter what sacrifice they have to take. I believe that the Messiah will be a collective of people. The deliverer will be a collective of people, not an individual.
Right, sir. Then there are many other questions. A lot of questions, but actually now we are running out
We're
of
running out
time.
of time also.
Running out of time. So I hope that those whose questions have been left, you will find your answers at some other point of time. Uh, Before I thank Tusharji once again for giving us his time to discuss this very important issue, I would like to narrate one very small incident, which to me at least gives some hope. Uh, uh, Today, what we were discussing and whatever Tusharji actually told us is a little depressing. It appears as if Indians have totally forgotten about Gandhiji. It also appears sometimes that we do not deserve a person like Gandhi. The incident which I am going to repeat before you happened with me a few years back at a time when excavations were going on at Ayodhya site. Tusharji, I was one of the observers appointed by the court. जो खुदाई वहां चल रही थी, जो कोर्ट ने ऑर्डर किया था, इट वॉज अ कोर्ट ऑर्डर्ड. दैट्स अनदर इशू ऑल टुगेदर के खुदाई से करके प्रॉपर्टी मैटर्स कैसे सॉल्व होते हैं. I mean, that is another issue which would lead us to the question, do we really deserve a person like Gandhi उसी हिंदुस्तान में जहां गांधी जी ने ऐसी बातें की थी, वहां के सुप्रीम कोर्ट ये ऑर्डर कर रहा था कि आप एक्सकैवेशन के थ्रू आप प्रॉपर्टी मैटर आप डील करें. दैट्स अ टोटली डिफरेंट इशू. लेकिन उसमें मैं दूसरी कहानी आपको सुनाना चाहता हूं, जिससे मुझे एक इंस्पिरेशन मिला था और मुझे लगा था कि नहीं, मेरा वो हिंदुस्तान जिसको मेरे बाप ने चुना था कि यहाँ रहेंगे, क्योंकि उन्होंने नेहरू जी और गांधी जी के साथ मिलके हमारी आज़ादी के मूवमेंट में हिस्सा लिया था. और जब उनको ये मौका मिला था कि वो ये चूज करें कि कहाँ जाएं, पाकिस्तान जाएं या किसी और मुल्क में चले जाएं, मेरे बाप ने इस मुल्क को चुना था. और बीच में जिस जाने में वो खुदाई चल रही थी, मुझे ये शक होने लगा था कि क्या वाकई उन्होंने सही फैसला किया था कि नहीं. लेकिन उस छोटे से वाक़े ने मुझे ये कन्विंस किया, और आज तक मैं कन्विंस्ड हूं कि पूरा हिंदुस्तान अभी भी गांधी जी को नहीं भूला. आवर न्यूज़पेपर्स, द इंटेलिजेंसिया, द पॉलिटिकल क्लास may have forgotten Gandhi and his message, but the Indians living within the countryside still remember and follow the same traditions. तुषार जी, एक दिन जब खुदाई जून जुलाई का वक्त था, चलती वैसी धूप, ऐसी गर्मी, उसमें हम लोग साइड पे खड़े होके पूरे दिन उस गर्मी में देखते थे, और चारों तरफ से कॉर्डन्स लगे हुए थे. हम लोग की चेकिंग हो के वी वुड गो इनसाइड, और बाहर जब निकलते थे तब थोड़ी फ्रीडम मिलती थी, और चारों तरफ से पुलिस घेरे हुए, और हम लोग ना कोई फूड पैकेट ले जा सकते थे, ना कोई और चीज ले जा सकते थे. बस जितना गवर्नमेंट हमें देती थी वही हमें सब कुछ करना होता था. एक अजीब सा एक माहौल था. और नारे ये लग रहे होते थे क्योंकि कनाते बनी हुई थी, और कनातों के उधर से भक्त आया करते थे, और अंदर जहां पे हम लोग खड़े होके खुदाई को ऑब्जर्व कर रहे होते थे, और ये इन लोगों को पता चल जाता था कि कुछ मुसलमान हजरात भी वहां आए हुए हैं, तो वहां पे उस इलाके में ज्यादा नारे लगते थे. डर भी महसूस होता था. तो उसी जमाने में एक दिन जब बिल्कुल थके हारे, एग्जॉस्टेड, मैं अयोध्या साइड से मैं बाहर निकला, उस बैरियर से बाहर जहां तक हम लोग को वो था, और गाड़ी की तरफ जाने लगा, तो मुझे उस अयोध्या की गलियों में, एक छोटी सी गली में एक ठेले वाला नजर आया जो बेल का शरबत बेच रहा था. और इतनी प्यास लगी हुई थी, इतनी गर्मी मुझे लग रही थी कि बेसाख्ता मैं उस बेल वाले के पास गया. जैसे ही मैं वहां पहुंचा, तुषार जी, पीछे से जो आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया में खुदाई करने वाले जो लोग आए हुए थे, उनमें से एक ने ये आवाज दी उस ठेले वाले को कि तुम जानते हो ये कौन है. और उस ठेले वाले ने हाथ जोड़ के ये कहा, हाँ भाई, आप जानते हैं, ये मस्जिद बनवाने आए, लेकिन ये हमारे अतिथि. और यकीन जानिए तुषार जी के उस प्रोवोकेशन के बाद भी इस ठेले वाले ने मुझे 2 ग्लास उस शरबत के पिलाए, और पैसे लेने से इनकार कर रहा था कि आप हमारे अतिथि हैं, भले आप आए होंगे राम मंदिर के खिलाफ, लेकिन आप हमारे अतिथि हैं और अतिथि से हम पैसा नहीं लेते. They were not concerned whether I belong to which party, whether I was a Muslim or a Hindu or whatever. They were more concerned that I was a guest of their city. I also realized during that period of time that whatever was happening within Ayodhya was being conducted by the outsiders as far as the people of Ayodhya were concerned. जो बड़े बड़े मंदिरों के महंत थे, वो जो मुस्लिम पार्टी वाले जो टोपियां लगा लगा के वहां मौजूद होते थे, दोनों साथ बैठ के खाना खा रहे होते थे. तो उससे मुझे ये तकवीयत मिली कि नहीं, अभी गांधी का मैसेज अभी जिंदा है. द ओनली थिंग इज कि इतना हाइपरबोलिक कैकाफनी मची हुई है चारों तरफ, जिसमें ये जो आम इंसान की जो आवाज है वो कहीं दबती भी नजर आ रही है. इस टॉपिक को जिसको हमने आज डिस्कस किया, डू वी डिजर्व गांधी, और एक इंप्रेशन ये पड़ा कि वी एक्चुअली डू नॉट. लेकिन तुषार जी, मुझे पूरी उम्मीद है और यकीन है बल्कि कि हमें गांधी की सिर्फ जरूरत नहीं है, बल्कि वी ऑल्सो डिजर्व हिम. और अगर एक बड़ा तबका हिंदुस्तानियों का ऐसा नहीं होता तो आज भी हम और आप इस मुल्क में बैठ के और खुलेआम बात नहीं कर रहे. I still believe that the idea of India, which was brought out by Ashoka the Great, which was developed by Akbar the Great, about which Gandhiji fought, the idea which was presented to us by Nehru's work Discovery of India, the idea of India which B.R. Ambedkar included in the drafting of the constitution is still alive. The only thing is कि जैसे चौरी चौरा का वाकया हुआ था, हमको 2 स्टेप पीछे लेने पड़े थे और अपने को कैलिब्रेट करना पड़ा था. आज भी शायद तुषार जी वो जरूरत है कि हम इसको सोचें, समझें, हम हताश न हो. हिंदुस्तान सैकड़ों हजारों सालों से है और चलता रहेगा. जिन्ना, सावरकर, मुस्लिम लीग, वो नेशनल कांग्रेस जो कभी गांधी से पहले था, उस टाइप की ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, उस टाइप के इंडिविजुअल्स आते रहेंगे, जाते रहेंगे. मैं बस एक नोट पे आपके खत्म करूंगा जो आप ही ने बात कही थी कि जब कोई किसी को फॉलो नहीं करना, मतलब अमल नहीं करना चाहता, प्रैक्टिस नहीं करना चाहता, तो उसको प्रभु और महात्मा का लक़ब दे देते. जाहिर है कि अगर आप कहेंगे कि रामचंद्र जी ने क्या किया था तो फौरन ये कहा जाएगा वो तो प्रभु उनके बंदे. महात्मा गांधी ने किया था वो तो महात्मा थे, वो तो अलग ही चीज है. ये टेक्स्ट हमने महात्मा गांधी का फायदा उठाने के लिए उनको महात्मा डिक्लेयर करके अपनी जिम्मेदारी से बचने चाहिए. महात्मा गांधी was very much like any of us. And what we should do is strive to act in the same fashion as he can. बहुत सी उनकी राइटिंग अगर आप पढ़ेंगे तो साथ ही आपको तो जाहिर है कि आपके खानदान के आपको सब पढ़ा होगा. बड़े कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन हैं बाबू. कहीं महात्मा जी कुछ लिख रहे हैं, कहीं तो कुछ लिख रहे हैं. दैट इज नॉट इम्पोर्टेंट. द इम्पोर्टेंस इज हाउ द मैन इवॉल्व्ड. वही आदमी जब लंदन जा रहा था उसके कैसे ख्यालात, लेकिन कुछ दिन के बाद जब उसने बिहार का दौरा किया तो उसके ख्यालात किस टाइप के होते हैं। अल्टीमेटली जब मुल्क में एक उस टाइप की फिजा फैली, और जिसको इरफान हबीब कहते हैं कि जो गांधी जी का जो ग्लोरियस मोमेंट था, उनका आखिरी दौर, जिस वक्त कम्युनलिज्म से वो फाइट कर रहे थे, अगर आप पूरे उस ट्रैजेक्टरी को देखें, उस यंग गांधी से डेवलपमेंट आखिर तक, वो एक किसान था और हमारे आपके लिए एक मशले राह था, एक वो आइडिया दे रहा था कि देखो तुम हर सिचुएशन में मुझे फॉलो करो। He is still relevant. We need Gandhi, and we also deserve Gandhi. Thank you very much, Tushar ji, for being
I
with us and talking to us.
I would just like permission from you to end with one thing. I'm sorry I'm going against the norm
Oh,
of saying after you've thanked me, but I just want to remind us that all this is because we want to warn. बापू को 3 गोलियां लगी, तीसरी गोली पे उनकी मौत हुई। आइडिया ऑफ इंडिया पे 2 गोलियां चल चुकी, और ये हमारा फर्ज है कि हम तीसरी गोली चलने से रोकेंगे या वो गोली चला दी जाएगी और हमें मार दिया जाएगा। I'd like to leave you with this thought.
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू, थैंक यू। इट्स अ गुड मैसेज। आई होप कि जो सुनने वाले हैं, जो अभी जुड़े हुए हैं और बाद में जुड़े हुए, इस चीज़ को समझेंगे और गांधी जी की रिलेवेंस जो हम में बाकी है, गांधी जी को पढ़ेंगे और समझेंगे और ये अंदाज लगाएंगे कि कैसा आदमी था जिसने किन मझधारों से निकाल के हमें यहाँ तक पहुँचाया। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Thank you, sir.